Does death care that you are a child? Would war or disease spare someone because they are a child? Does violence of any kind care that they are a child? No. No, they don't care. Whether it's your age, ethnicity, or gender, no one is spared from this violence. And within the eyes of those who were subjected to such violence for a very long time, you start to see the way that their eyes dim, permeating with the dread and the heavy wariness that continues to linger in their being. No longer do they see humans as, well, humans. Instead, they only see cold monsters on the battlefield who are there to hunt them down, whether it's due to a defense mechanism or something else. And so the devastating loss of innocence, the desperate cry for help, the anguish, the envy, the heart-shattering grief over what they could have had but did not, the horrible bitterness that twists and turns inside until you're no longer who you once were. Everything drowns them into an endless black hole, with most not realizing that a speck of light, of hope, was in the distance. Instead, they start to view themselves as something more sinister. But what could that be? Well, Rosmontis actually says it very clearly in chapter 7. She says to Dokta,
"When Amiya or I stand on the battlefield, who looks at us and thinks, 'Children, we're monsters, aren't we, Dokta?'"
Yes, monsters. That's what she said. But is she really a monster? Is Amiya really a monster? To us, the players, the two are just 14-year-old girls who have suffered in the past extensively. But perhaps to any other normal person, everyone on the battlefield is considered a monster, because no normal person would fight with such intent to destroy. And maybe even to the opponents, the two are still seen as monsters, the same monsters as them, fighting for survival, fighting for their cause. But even so, aren't the true monsters the violence found in nature, in people, and in other things? Whether it's oropathy, catastrophes, armed conflicts, or abuse? It makes me realize once more that violence can be found anywhere in the world of Arknights, and in our own world, including the internet. Nothing is spared, no one is spared. Just like how the infected can be both the abused and the abusers, the non-infected too are the same. And perhaps because of that, the majority don't even try to break the cycle, because that's all they ever knew growing up: violence. But if everyone gives up, then the cycle of violence will continue to persist for many generations, leaving more children, more adults, to feel empty inside, burning with the searing pain of bitterness, anger, frustration, and hatred. Like what happened with Reunion, and their eventual preference for violent methods and solutions. And yet, it's quite clear that breaking such a cycle is easier said than done. After all, it just seems like a new hurdle that no one would ever be able to overcome at first glance. No single generation has the capability of immediately changing the minds of both past and new generations. Then is everything hopeless? Are we not able to fight against our own fate? The fate that we never asked for? No. As Amiya once said in the Prelude to Dawn trailer with Rhodes Creed,
"Silent we shall be, should conflict be avoidable, but fight tooth and nail should it be necessary."
We too should live by that creed, just like Rhodes themselves. Just like Amiya and Rosmontis, to fight tooth and nail. Because inside that once dark hole, there is actually still light above us. So while we may have started life by looking downwards towards the darkness where nothing but dirt lies, we can still begin to climb up that hole little by little, even if our fingernails crack, our blood spills, and our hands grasp desperately at the dirt wall, towards the sky where the light shines upon us. And by doing so, we do what Rhodes is doing, breaking that cycle of violence for the better, for the future of those behind us. And the best example of someone who exemplifies this goal? Rosmontis. Now, despite her mental instability, her memory loss, and her anger that powers her desire to fight, she says this to Dokta at one point in chapter 7.
"The world is calling my name to prevent more people like me from coming into it."
And, true to her word, she fought and still fights for the betterment of the future and for the livelihoods of those behind her. To change the world after it, quote-unquote, called her name, as a part of Rhodes. To destroy something that tormented her and the others for so long, to prevent more victims like herself from appearing anymore in this beautiful yet devastating world. So reminiscent of our own world. Nothing could stop her, right? But just when I think that we're always reminded once again that even people like Rosmontis can falter in the face of anything, whether it's due to stress, a fight, a person, her arts, or more. Like a normal human being. Which is why it's so important to remember that as long as you continue to move forward, to break that cycle of violence, that there will be those who share the same vision as you, ultimately leading them, including yourself, to unite as one. Because it's not just you who might have experienced one kind of violence. There are others like you waiting to find another who they can relate to and unite with. Whether the violence you experience comes in the form of sickness, abuse, natural disasters, wars, or something completely different, it doesn't matter in the end. Because once you find those people whose intention is the same as yours, then you will no longer be alone in this world. And that's why, when there comes a time that you falter, you will not fall to the ground helplessly. Instead, you will be picked up right as you're about to crash, by those around you who share that same vision, reminding you once again that this journey is not just yours, but theirs as well. But doesn't all that sound oddly familiar to you? That's right. You might have realized it by now, but it sure sounds like how Rhodes operates as a whole. Offering empathy, trust, and compassion towards their own, and even towards the ones who fought against them, regardless of whether they are infected or not. Remembering that more violence does not end violence. But even if they do their best to embody such ideals, they still do fight on the battlefield. And yet, when they do fight, it's not for violence, for bitterness, for anger, or for hatred. It's for proving their determination, their devotion, and their sincerity to both themselves and the people around them. But can we say the same thing about reunion? While a few do have good intentions, most fight and spill blood to prove how much worse they have it, to satisfy their bitterness, their anger, their resentment, and their hatred towards the more fortunate. So how can they break the cycle of violence when they themselves are transitioning from the position of the abused to the role of the abuser, further perpetuating the cycle of violence even more than before? Can we confidently say that they'll be able to escape from the dark hole, and that future generations will be able to live a better life with the type of efforts and reasons reunion puts into their actions? I highly doubt it. Destruction, showing their pain, and inflicting pain onto others as revenge, enjoying the fact that those who they deemed as the more fortunate are now suffering. Obviously, none of those can end the cycle of violence. Instead, they can only strengthen the cycle, creating even more victims to come about in the world. So, what should we do in the end? We should be more like Rhodes, be more like Amiya and Rosmontis, be more like those who are willing to unite as one to fight for the betterment of the world, to end the violence, and to not allow hatred to define them as a person. And to remember the words that Calcid said to Rosmontis in Chapter 7. Keep pushing, Rosmontis. Walk forward. Because as long as we can do that, even in the face of so much adversity, we too can break that cycle of violence together, no matter how long it takes. Whether it's only in the world of Arknights as Dokta, or in our own world as ourselves, or perhaps even both.